Rye.
This is Senate Appropriations, and we're taking additional testimony on the FY24 budget. And we have Heather Simons here from the Criminal Justice Council. Jason Pinard, I guess, is here to make sure what you're saying is what is being requested. So Senator Sears would normally be on, and obviously this is his section of the budget, but we suspect he might be suffering a power outage because Bennington and the southern part of the state, I think, has been greatly impacted, more so than up here by the storm. And then Senator Starr is joining us remotely. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Heather, to walk us through the budget presentation. And then we were going to tie this into a bill that we have. I think it's S6.
Yes.
That has to do with interrogation of juveniles and those techniques. So if you could start with your budget, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. For the record, Heather Simons, Executive Director, Vermont Criminal Justice Council. I just got my power back a little bit ago, so I think there are a lot more folks losing it at the moment. But so I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. We weren't sure if we were answering questions with regards to some requests or doing the presentation. So we did reach out to Jason and gave him a full 8 minutes notice, I think. Mm-hmm. And he usually, he's been great. He does the walks through the ups and downs, and then we can talk about, I can talk about the mission, what we're trying to accomplish and what the requests are. And I think, though I don't see him on, I think Deputy Director Brickell is also on to answer questions about interrogation.
Someone else is joining.
Senator Sears is just getting on.
Oh, Senator Sears is. Okay, that's great. And then do we have copies of S6 in the committee?
Yeah. And then Ben from Ledge Council will be here too.
Okay. All right. So why don't we go through quickly your budget request, then you have some additional in terms of new positions or new requests in addition to your base budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so why don't we just start with your budget and what is being requested in the governor's recommended, and then we can see to what extent maybe that subsequent legislation might alter where those positions could best be defined depending on the work ahead. So why don't we start, and then we can connect it, walk us into S6. Senator Sears, welcome. Glad you're online. We were afraid you didn't have any power.
Well, we've got power, but it's about to go out, I think.
Oh. So we're going to get started then with the budget, and then we will look at S6 and see what impact that might have, or the nexus with the budget that's being presented here. Because there's a position in that bill. Is there a position in the bill, S6?
Yes, for a position for a policy, somebody to write policies. We've asked them to do policies over the years. You know, for example, for police officers, this policy, that policy. So this bill asks statewide policy regarding custodial interrogation.
So there are positions in here for 1.1, and I guess we're going to have to evaluate the requested positions relative to this new assignment and the extent to which it impacts or is additive or whatever. So why don't we get started then with the budget, and then we can walk us into S6. So I'll turn it over to you, Heather.
Thank you. Again, Heather Simons. I'll walk through the request the governors recommend think you just said 1.1. The one, I think it was 1.4 for the full project. That is to cover a curriculum review of the police academy for national best practices and also international certification. That is that includes a statewide job task analysis of all law enforcement in Vermont in order to standardize training. The academy, we're only one of a couple of states that has only one academy. And so this is precedent setting for the rest of the country that we could stabilize and certify internationally our curriculum. Much of the training that we already do, we think is already there, but we can't prove it. And the accreditation is really baseline. States like Ohio has 87 academies. That's a really complicated process. We have one. So this has been what certainly I have been working on with my staff for the last year, which is how we move through reform and transformation in a way that doesn't cause confusion with the levels of certification. The two fair and impartial policing positions that were also included in the governor's recommend. I know that folks are aware that in spite of fair and impartial mandates and policies and trainings, there was not one fair and impartial policing trainer in the state in law enforcement. And that really kind of held us hostage to not being able to shape the training the way Vermont wants to, or being overly reliant on contractors. But there wasn't, that involves the full umbrella of implicit and explicit bias, equity, race, training around LGBTQ and vulnerable populations, and how that fits into the larger mission of law enforcement, communication, de-escalation, and certainly working with people in crisis in the community, English as a second language, et cetera. So there's there would be a director position for oversight that would also include community and community efforts and marketing what we're trying to do with the academy and making those relationships work. And then there would be clearly a full-time trainer who I know would be really busy right out of the gate, but also an opportunity for us to really stabilize what we want to see for training across the board. The policy director, we're very grateful for that suggestion from Senator Sears. We also, as you know, went through an audit this summer around compliance and the basic expectations around policy, certification, training, attendance, and there just has never been any policy position at the academy. So in addition to us now being in the business of crafting and working with other agencies on either model policy or standard policy, we're behind on our standardized internal policies as well. And we really, in order for us to be operationally sound, need to do both at the same time in order to keep up. And that would include things like security. I think folks know, at least most people seem to know, that the academy doesn't have any cameras on the property, for example. So gatekeeping is tricky. And so it's important that we have sound policies because we have so many visitors and outside folks coming in, and a lot of doors. So security is one area, personnel is another area, operations is an area, and then certainly policies around professional regulation are also going to expand. So this is another position that will be busy right away. And with us, our staff attorney starts in a couple days. They'll be working with them. So those are the two positions. And then there was one-time money that is included for that job task analysis, which will include the community, law enforcement leaders, practitioners, advocacy groups, et cetera. That RFP was scheduled to go out, I think, yesterday. We're adding language around equity into the announcement, and then it'll probably be posted tomorrow or the next day. That's the overall data, as you know, is a challenge. The National Police Institute has released their report. That was a challenge, bringing in contractors to analyze the data, traffic stop data that has a lot of complications associated with it, but we also don't have staff to analyze data. We don't have a position at all. And that is that position, as well as working on traffic stop data. We need data for recruitment, data for training, data for certification and compliance, as well as tracking through professional regulations. So that's a heavy lift for us. And we really, it can't be an added duty to someone else. Our trainers are training or coordinating training all the time. So we really were feeling that, the burden of trying to figure out how to do that. And we're happy to do it. We think it makes sense. And that is a good way for us to stay accountable across the board between certification and decertification. Sorry.
Well, I'm really struggling here. We have two documents that we've been provided. One is your 3 priority fair and impartial policing positions and benefits. And that is over 3 years, 1.4 million. And so I just need to be clear. Out of that 1.4 million, which you say would require one-time money over 3 years, is any of that reflected in the governor's budget as it was proposed?
That's the curriculum review, if I understand the question.
Yes.
Yes.
That's included in the governor's proposed budget.
Yes. The
Okay.
curriculum review. Yes, that's what that is. That's
Okay.
the full assessment.
And now we have, maybe this is just a breakdown. We have another document that has different accreditation, 200,000 positions, 1.1 million, software 120, and one-time funding of 200. So so my question is, this document that we have here, which is also called accreditation, and it starts with phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
Yeah.
Is that, can you tell me what this document relates to, what's in the governor's budget?
Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. That's over a 3-year period that covers that million plus. 200 the first year and 6 the following 2 years.
Uh-huh.
And Jason, jump in if you think I'm missing it.
No, so I guess what I'm just trying to understand, for those of us who are looking at this maybe for the first time, and Senator Sears may obviously understand this better than us, both these documents really are a detailed presentation of the curriculum revision accreditation project over 3 years. And this is, which would total 1.4. My question is, there's also ongoing new positions that you would need, and are they in the governor's budget?
No.
Asking for anything over and above what the governor's budget provides, I guess maybe that's a better way of phrasing it.
Yes, so I'm sorry that's confusing. We wanted to make sure that you had what we sent to everyone else. So we were asked to submit, I believe it was to House Appropriations, what our requests were, and then asked to pare it down. And the last, I don't think Lindsay's on, but I believe that the one that says phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, I think that's just basically a cheat sheet to keep us on track of what we asked for and what we're still needing.
Okay, and then in the budget base, as joint fiscal has described it, there's the position for the training positions and a records management system and system and fair and impartial policing. So the 386,525
Yeah.
is over and above this. This is one time and the other is base. Jason's shaking his head yes.
Okay, well then, me too.
All right. Sorry for questions, yes.
I still didn't understand what your question, the one-time money's all in here. Are the ongoing positions in here too?
That's what the 386,525.
But I think, I actually think the one-time money covers some positions for a period of time. What's in the base is the 386. The 1 point, I think it's four. It has positions being covered in it. They just would not, they would only go.
Does that doesn't overlap the three?
Right, they're separate.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to clarify, but.
Well, I didn't,
yeah. Which is-
you asked the question, but I didn't,
No, I know we're kind of struggling with this.
I couldn't hear.
Senator Sears, do you have any comments as we're struggling with this? Obviously, you're familiar with this curriculum revision and accreditation initiative that's being proposed here, and that brings a price tag of 1.4. And then
Right.
we know the training position, record management, fair and partial, there's another governor's proposed 386. So do you have any comments you want to share with the committee relative to this 3-year initiative that would provide the accreditation and the foundational work to necessary to do that, to achieve that accreditation?
Maybe it had escaped my mind at some point, but I don't remember hearing about the national accreditation, although it sounds like a good idea. I don't remember hearing specifically about that funding. I do remember hearing specifically about funding to improve the Washington.
So I guess the question then, well, this is what's in the budget. And then
Yeah.
I guess ultimately the question is, when you were building S6, were you aware of this and the extent to which the resources that are being said here, in fact, that work could be incorporated in this larger development of curriculum and training?
I honestly don't remember. I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. And so I guess that's one of our questions. Obviously, you were building the budget back in the fall and putting forth, and now we've got this bill. How do you see the, if this bill passes on the custodial interrogation of juveniles affecting this? Is it possible to take the policy components of this bill and make that part of this work that you're going to be doing over a 3-year period? In other words, the bill was done separately from this budget request around accreditation. Do you see that work could be incorporated, or are you saying in order to achieve the goals of S6, you need an additional position?
In addition to policy director?
Yes.
No, I think it would be, it's incorporated. Any policy that shifts mission and operations has to get trained. So it goes without saying that we would have to be including an operational component to that and new curriculum and assisting with instructor development and any additional policy that comes out of it.
Does that answer your question, Dick? In other words, if I'm understanding you correctly, we're saying that if in fact S6 passes and it has to do with how you interrogate juveniles and what are the accepted practices, that would fall into the work of your policy analysis and ultimately in your training.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be, okay, integrated into that.
Yeah, and
So-
and professional regulation.
Okay, so the position that was carried in S6, in fact, has kind of been preempted or would become part of this 3-year initiative that you've outlined here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, Senator Starr.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so are we talking about 1.4 or 1.7, almost 1.8 million in total?
We're talking about 1.7 in total, but 1.4 of it is one time.
Yeah,
And then the base increase is 386,525, and that would include funding ongoing, because the training position is going to be ongoing. I mean, once you
Yep.
develop the curriculum and so forth, and then records management system. And so there's a combination of one time and then base.
Yep.
In
Thanks.
the request. Senator Westman.
So what I can't make out is how much of that 1.4, if it's positions, is ongoing.
That's not at the moment.
No,
It's not at the moment. Could they live without those positions in the future?
well, that's the question we have to ask them.
Well, I'm asking.
3 years out, but it's
3 years out, once this process of revision and accreditation is completed.
So the idea around one-time money on a curriculum review is that we will be working with teams of people with the International Association of Director of Training Standards or another vendor that possibly bids. They're the only agency that includes the National Decertification Index with all of their best practices in training and professionalism. But the idea behind this is to have a self-sustaining system so that we don't, number one, a full review of level 2 and level 3 certification is, that's hundreds of hours of training. And what it does is it aligns certification with the level of skill required for the position, which includes our part, we can't start if we don't know what each position is. And there's a lot of changes and discussion around what each level of certification looks like or title. So sheriffs do something different than municipalities, which is a little bit different from Vermont State Police. What this project does is it helps us get something done in 3 years that would normally take 10 years if we tried to do it with one position at a time. And we should, included in this is instructor development. So what that means is that everyone on our staff at the academy and our certified instructors will know how to do a full review so that we can self-maintain. So it shouldn't require additional staff. We should be able to prop up what we have, and in most cases, just be able to prove what we're already doing, which is what the accreditation is.
Okay, so if I understand then what you're saying is that once we get through this multi-phase 3-year curriculum revision and accreditation, then you are not envisioning that the positions that were in place to do this work, you're going to say 3 years from now, this position needs to be continued out into the future, over and above the positions that got included on an ongoing basis in the governor's proposed budget.
Well, fair and impartial policing is not going to go away. Those are national practices that get, they're layered. And what we also don't have in Vermont is a tiered training system. So for example, if you're a colonel in the state police and a new recruit, you're going to receive the same mandated fair and impartial policing. And what we're trying to develop through these positions additionally is a way to advance the level of expectations so that if you're in a management position, for example, you're going to be talking about systems and
Now,
how
I guess
to hold people
I'm-
accountable.
I'm sorry, Heather, I guess I wasn't clear. Are you anticipating at the end of 3 years, any of the positions that are funded with this one-time money are already in your mind are going to be needed out into the future?
Are you gonna be asking for more money in
Or are
3
you,
years?
in 3 years, are you going to say, we need to continue
Or,
to any of the positions that are currently funding with one time? We're trying to get a sense of, once we get this process finished, will the staffing that you have in place on an ongoing basis be at the level necessary to carry out the work of the council?
So I'm apologies. I do understand the question. But with a full curriculum review, we're going to find out how much more we have to do. And I don't know I don't know what that will entail. But I can tell you that this is several decades of not paying attention to it. And so whether it's compliance or software, policy or data, it's been a skeleton staff, and we've got some catching up to do. I have said this in other committees. I think we're a little bit behind, but it's not going to take much to be out in front. And
What you're saying is that it would be premature to say we're going to, at this point, what we would need for staffing at the end of the 3 years.
Right.
You're not saying this is a plan, and I know in my heart of hearts, we're going to need at least 2 more of these positions that have been funded under this pilot to continue to carry out the work of the council.
Right. I mean, I anticipate we're going to be very successful and get a lot of momentum and a lot of attention, and there will be more resources needed to expand what Vermont's doing, which is taking one police academy and internationally certifying it, and we'll be the only state that has done that.
Other questions, Senator Lyons?
Well, I think that my question's been answered. I was just wondering, once you do all of this work, obviously there'll be some of the curriculum development or some of the other work, whether it's IT, that will be handed over to go forward. I mean, you're developing something new, or at least looking for a report that will help you develop something new. So I guess you must be anticipating some increased need and staffing. And also, if it's going to be technologically based, some distribution of technology across the state for this type of training.
Well, that's a priority too.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
There's a lot there that, we learned a lot. We were already very behind in that area before COVID, but certainly we learned a lot about how we need to transfer technology and information during a pandemic when people need to have information. We didn't close, as you know. We couldn't close because of the realities around recruitment with law enforcement. And so we had to get very creative around things like quarantine and online learning, which was folks did the best they could, but these requests around technology get us into the 21st century on how to deliver training in law enforcement, not to replace it. Most of it still needs to be in person, but there's a lot that we can do in the interactive world with technology. And I think that there's still, we're expecting to see more changes in the profession and expectations around policies and mandates that we'll have to implement. And in addition to that, that like the auditor's office discovered what we knew that they would, which is we're shy on compliance, that there are expectations for officers around training, but we didn't have anyone to check, to go to departments and to review files. The tracking has been non-existent. And I don't mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying what we've discovered in our efforts to get really moving is that we're behind.
Well, I don't think we're just trying to understand the different moving pieces here and sort of what we would anticipate at the end of the pilot. Sometimes people knowingly say it would be ending knowing full well that it was going to take addition, and no one can predict the future. I think that's what you're kind of saying. A lot of work ahead that would probably influence that. It sounds like you've got a pretty ambitious agenda to get to the accreditation, but if Vermont does it, it seems like we'd be very well positioned nationally for the work. Senator Sears, do you have any other comments, or do you think we've managed to sort this out? So this 3-page document down at the last page, which talks about what asked, is really what adds up to the 385.
Yep.
In the base. It's the first is the 3-year one-time funding, and then the other is what would go into the base of council. And you can see there is a training compliance specialist there, personnel support, program support, business manager, and so forth.
There's more than 385 on that priority 4.
What?
There's more than 385,000 in that priority 4.
In the remaining asks?
Yeah, there's 121, 110, 115 for business manager, 99 for the program support personnel, another 99.
Yeah. It's 4.
Some of those are part of this.
Yeah, I'm looking at this document here,
Yeah, so we are
but there's not 5 there.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5.
Well, program support personnel is also choice, I don't know, but the descriptions are different.
I see 4.
550.
Training, compliance, business manager, and 2 support persons.
Well, I guess I'm counting this under priority 4, compliance with certification.
You're looking at remaining
And then you're going-
asks and then
yeah.
there's
No, that's
something-
part of priority 4.
The remaining budget ask we think of
Is
is,
the 350.
yeah, the 384, the 4.
That's the confusing part is.
But the 121 is not part of the 1.4.
I think it is.
I think it is. That's priority 4.
Compliance and certification.
And the remaining budget asks are the ones that are in the base budget, which is the 110, the 115, and the 200. 200, 300, well, it's more than
Yeah, there's-
385.
Yeah, there's 425.
Yeah. Jason, did one of them not get funded? And what we're trying to, is there something being asked for here that's not in the governor's budget? Well,
Where's the 3, if I wanted to find it, because where would I find the 310?
oh, the 385. It's in the 1100.
No, the 1100 would be the one time. The 385 would be in the,
Oh,
In the-
in the base, I'm sorry, I don't
it's in
know
the
that.
E 200 something, and there may, open it.
Sorry, I'm looking at the one.
The 384 was an amount from the governor's small budget book that Adam identified as the base up.
So it was in the governor's budget book. Well, it doesn't seem to match here. Let's see if we can figure it out. You understand what we're doing here, Jason? Trying to figure out what's in the 385 versus what's on the third page of this memo document that has the title Remaining Budget Asks. So that in the budget asks are training compliance specialist, 110, business manager, 115, and 2 personnel, program support personnel, 2 of them about 100,000 each, which is 200, 315, and 110 is for 25 or so.
Yeah.
So we're not adding up to what was in the governor's budget book.
I'm wondering if there's some other funding sources besides general fund.
Maybe that's it. Maybe there's some other funding sources. We'll figure it out, rather than attempting to do it off the cuff here. Other questions about the work ahead in terms of getting our criminal justice training council and curriculum up to date. Certainly the whole area of fair and impartial policing has been a priority for our judiciary committee, and this is really an ambitious undertaking. So, okay. Any other questions that are around the budget at this point? Okay, then maybe the next thing, while we have you here, Heather, if you're willing, you're familiar with S6?
I am, and Deputy Director Brickell's also on, and I think he did the first testimony, and he's really fluent in this, but either one of us can answer questions.
Okay, I just want to be clear that based on what you've told us, that the work that needs to be done and the policy that are articulated in S6 would in fact be integrated as part of this 3-year work, and therefore the position that is carried in S6 in fact is subsumed into the budget requests of the 1.4 million.
I'm very clear what you're asking, and I'm very clear when I say absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that there's no confusion on that, and if we pull that position out and move forward with the 1.4 and the 385, that we have not in any way had anything that would have a negative impact on your ability to carry out the intent of this other piece of legislation. So thank you very much. It's one of your, I would say, one of the most unequivocal statements we get from a witness.
Let's hope I'm right, but
All right, thank you.
everything, just to be clear, everything that we have outlined and planned and requested, each position or every dollar affects this project and in turn the project, the outcome. That there are no side initiatives or side projects. They really all travel together. We can't hold people accountable through professional regulation if they don't know what the rules are, and they don't know the rules are if we don't train them, and we can't train if we're not clear. So it's a pretty clean circle.
Yeah, and I guess in many respects, even after the completion of the project, curriculum, it's going to be a constantly evolving process as new issues come forward, different training needs get identified, and so forth. So I would not think that the work is sort of will ever sort of be the perfect ending, and it's going to be constantly reviewed and modified as you move forward.
Yeah, this is very exciting, if I may. And this is an opportunity where we have started to make a couple changes, and now, for lack of a better term, like gutting the whole thing really catapults us into best practices in every area. And that's a very healthy way to go about business in a high liability training world.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
So why don't we go to S6 at this point?
The four positions on the back of this memo is entirely the 1.4.
Right.
It doesn't include the 380.
Well, then what are those other positions then? Other
They're
budget?
part of the list of positions that are here.
Okay, all right,
They all go
thank you,
together.
thank you, all right. No wonder it didn't add up, Stephanie. All right, I don't know, Ben, if you want to come up as well.
Sure.
I'll
join the
And we will start, do you have any kind of introductory comments that you want to make, Senator Sears, since this bill came out of your committee? On S6?
Other than that, the committee spent the time on the bill and trying to refine it so that it truly reflected interrogation techniques that are used on juveniles. You'll see we increased the age to 22 because that's the age of youthful offender. But there is a national movement, and there have been several states that have stopped the interrogation techniques. And as we heard in committee, there's a lot of controversy about interrogation, and particularly some used by the Vermont State Police are different from local police. And so for that reason, we wanted a standardized minimum standard of interrogation policies that would be true for all departments in the state. And that's where that position came from that we've already discussed. But it really is, I think, important that if we want policies to succeed and to have them used statewide, at least minimum policies, that they do proper funding of the positions that it takes to do the policies. So that's really the genesis of the appropriation, but also the idea behind the bill is to have minimum standards and then just not allow, I refer to it as lying to kids, but, and we did hear testimony that most police agencies in Vermont have already moved in that direction.
Okay, and there was some discussion about whether these standards should apply to adults as well, but this is limited to just juveniles at this point.
Well, yeah, we actually went a little higher than has been done in other states. We went to age 22. This was originally something that was in the, came from the House as something for the Justice Oversight Committee to look at. And the Justice Oversight Committee recommended a bill just for juveniles.
All right, thank you. Ben, do you want to just, and it looks like the reason we have the bill is because it carried an appropriation for a position, but we've just had testimony that in fact, as we look at this in combination, the work and this would really fall into the curriculum development and the training that would, which needs to be done and would be part of a much larger initiative. So we can go through the bill. Senator Sears has kind of given us an update, but I think what our action would be if we're going to move forward with really this very significant 3-year initiative, that we would simply remove that section of this bill, knowing that in fact we're going to accomplish this and a whole lot more with what the council is proposing to do. Do you have anything more about the bill itself you want to add?
Just a few things. So for the record, Ben Novogratski from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I believe this is actually my first time testifying in front of this committee. Being I've worked with many of you individually, so thank you for welcoming me. But Senator Sears did a good job at giving a brief overview. Just to add to that, so this creates a statewide law that sets the threshold at 22 years old, and anyone below that would be considered a juvenile. And to use Senator Sears's words, it would prevent them from lying to juveniles in order to obtain a confession or other statement involuntarily. But the nuances within that is the development of the policy itself. So that occurs over a period of time, and this is really outlined in section 4 of the bill. And I should note that actually the most current version of the bill is draft 4.0. It doesn't affect the appropriation. It was 2 minor grammatical changes. So just as for reference, but so it would begin on October 1st of this year, that the Criminal Justice Council and the Attorney General's office would work together to create a model interrogation policy that expands from just juveniles, but to all persons with specifically enumerated circumstances that would be contemplated within the policy. So that would occur, and then by January 1st of 2024, the Criminal Justice Council, in consultation with other stakeholders, would update its policy to establish one cohesive one for all law enforcement agencies throughout the state to adopt. And then once that adoption occurs, so that would, each law enforcement agency would be required to adopt the model policy by April 1st of next year. And excuse me.
So I have a question of Heather. Looking at the dates in S6 relative to the work, the timeframe for your work, are those dates aligned sufficiently?
I'm gonna let the deputy weigh in on that because I always think we can get things done quicker.
Okay, I guess it's yours.
You're on mute, Chris.
Yeah, Chris is muted.
Right. For the record, Christopher Burkell, Deputy Director of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. And yes, to quote Heather, she does tend to think sometimes that we can accomplish things with the staff that we do have because we have ambitious goals here and a lot of work to do. And while I think there was a lot of good work that went into this policy, I think in my testimony earlier, I think Senator Sears recognized the real need for us to be able to do this within the time frame that was proposed in the legislation. There's a lot of work to go into this policy, and it's not that we mind doing it, but this policy, affects interrogations that are both in custody and outside of a detention center, and it also has to do with a lot of things around, people with intellectual disabilities and substance abuse and all of those things that have to be taken into account when drafting that policy. And typically, as a matter of routine, when the Criminal Justice Council is tasked with creating a policy, it typically goes through a couple of committees, and we grab subject matter experts to give their opinions and how the best practices should play out in developing that policy. And I think Senator Sears heard in my testimony that we don't have a director of policy, and that process normally takes a rather lengthy amount of time when individuals are coming before the training advisory committee and then before the council on what our best practices. So I think it was, and it was very appreciated of, Senator Sears' mention of helping us with an appropriation to have somebody that not only would be a director of policy for that, but all the other mandated policies over the years that the council has been tasked with. I mean, we've got fair and impartial policing policy, conducted electrical weapons policy, body worn and camera policies, and haven't even had the ability to run into compliance with all of those policies, let alone to regulate, draft these policies and update them and keep them relevant. So very briefly, yes, I worry a little bit about the time frame, but I don't want that to be negatively impacted on this bill moving forward.
So if we put the resources in place of the 1.4 million, then in light of everything you said, this is quite a bit of work to do. I just want to make sure that what you're saying is consistent with what we've just heard from the director, because it sounded to me like you felt you do need the policy director on top of it.
I'm totally consistent with the director's statements as to what she said, because when we get done with a 3-year project and a complete review of curriculum, we are going to have updated and defensible and best practice trainings. And along with those trainings go policy updates. But I was looking at this as if this is a policy that we have to create before this curriculum assessment even takes place, where do we find the expertise in order to do that?
So
Where do we find?
So you were responding to my question about does the timeline for this bill, how well that fits with the work that you have got over this 3-year period of time. And I think if I understand what you're saying is this bill moves faster than you think that work. It can be done and it can be incorporated and integrated, but it may not be quite as rapid as envisioned in S6 as it currently is written. Is that a correct understanding of what you've told us?
That's a correct assessment. My fear is that we don't have the time frame in which to meet this and do the policy justice as it's crafted with all the nuances that go with it. Doesn't mean that we can't do it, but when you're looking at, you typically look at policy going along with curriculum development, and our plan, because this is an overhaul of our entire curriculum assessment, is going to take some time. We wouldn't break it up into little chunks about one specific area first. So it's going to be a total curriculum assessment that starts with the job task analysis of what exactly does Vermont need and what does Vermont law enforcement need to provide to the citizens here. So yeah, I'm not saying that this is additional money. This was, I think, Senator Sears' recognition of the amount of work that was being tasked to the council and the time frame in which it was being asked to be done.
I'm not sure where that leaves me. All right, Ben, we've got the answer.
I don't know if I have the answer, but I have some context to provide. So the timeline that is outlined in this bill was derived from other bills related to model interrogation, not just model policies that were adopted. It's not a exact takeout from those other policies. It was done to balance the considerations of this is an important policy that I think the Senate Judiciary Committee considered, and balancing out with the Criminal Justice Council's constrictions. That being said, not knowing fully what the 3-year review is and just coming in, part of this policy development is that in October of 21 and every even number year thereafter, so again, starting in 2026, the council in consultation with others would review and potentially update the policy. So maybe that lends itself to the training curricula update and everything that's going on with that, but I'm not sure, but there is that every 2-year review, if you will, of the policy itself.
Actually, I would think we would probably want to do it for in a broader context than rather policy by policy, but in terms of currency and need to update. Senator Sears, do you have, can you help us? In other words, it sounds like if we say, this is our top priority, we want you to move this forward independently of the work that you're doing to over this 3-year period of time to get to accreditation and curriculum development, then in fact, it seems like there is some disjuncture on the timing side, and we would have to, if it's so time sensitive that it can't be incorporated into this larger overall curriculum redesign, and it moves forward more immediately, then it does sound like it would take additional resources. And I'm just wondering, to what extent did the committee look at this particular piece of legislation and the policy and what it would take to implement it relative to this 3-year project that the council's going to be undertaking?
I think it could be accomplished from listening to the testimony, listening to both Heather Simons and Chris McNell. I think we can accomplish what we want to do with creating that position within the 3-year group. But I don't see that position going away. I mean, for the purposes of S6, you could use one-time money, frankly. But I think in the future, as the this was what sold me, was the legislature continually asked the training council to come up with model policies. I don't know what's next after interrogation, but I'm sure there will be one. And so the need to have someone who's an expert in writing policies, an expert in developing them, so that they do work for the majority of in the state. And we have such divergent law enforcement agencies, all the way from our Vermont State Police to local constables that would come under these various policies. And I think that's why I think that the position needs to be permanent, but for the purpose of this bill, it certainly can be done with one-time accommodation. But I think you're going to find that as the legislature continues to ask the council to make more and more consistent statewide policies, which is the direction we're trying to do away with geographic diversity, quite frankly. And that's part of that direction.
So I'm back to the fundamental question.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it does. What you're basically saying, you think in the end, after 3 years, there's the, your assessment of that continuing workload is going to require an ongoing position after that 3 years.
I don't know what the next policy would be, but I suspect that we're going to continue to look for statewide policies for law enforcement.
But one would hope that if we do this update of our curriculum and accreditation, some of that would be anticipating nothing in this field stays static. So so I guess the question becomes one of, do we can strike that section and say, we're gonna do this as part of this accreditation. But it sounds like we still have got a problem maybe on the timing, and which I'm not clear on. And in fact, are we being asked, do we need to add the position here, or can we feel confident this work can go forward as part of that larger curriculum revision? And I think the council is saying it's a heavy lift. There's an awful lot there that probably, I think I'm hearing that some of the timeframes that might be in S6 would be a big stretch to do if we had to do this work separately from the larger curriculum development. So I guess the question ultimately is, do we strike that section on an appropriation and covering the policy director, is that what it is? Director of policy, yeah. In S6, feeling comfortable that this can be provided and addressed with the resources that we would be putting in to the council in the form of a total of $1.7 million, 1.4 for the project and 385 or whatever for the base.
Do you need to stretch the timing out?
Well, that's what I'm asking, whether the timing in S6 works relative to the 3-year time frame that we have for the pilot. So, Senator Starr, you have an opinion on the time frame?
Well, wouldn't you add that person at the end of 2 years if you thought you were going to need that person, or next year, or the 3rd year? I don't know a lot about this, but I've been listening to the discussion, and everybody seems to think we're gonna need a person, but why spend the money now if we don't need it for a year or 2 years or even the third year?
Well, I think that's probably the case. Senator Sears is saying in reality, probably the workload will necessitate having that capacity on an ongoing basis. But I'm back to the fundamental question of if we take the project that's been funded and proposed by the governor, will the timeframes in S6 work within that larger curriculum development initiative that the council has laid out here, which is a multi-year period of time? And the extent to which doing it separately adds another workload demand concurrently with this very ambitious agenda to get accredited. So the old saying, you have your hands full and your pants to hold up, the extent to which it is manageable by the council. So Ben, do you have a thought about timeframes?
It's not specifically about time frame, and I'm sorry that I can't answer that question. However, just for context, I mean, this is not the only policy that needs to be periodically reviewed and updated. There are a handful of statewide policies. So from, this is ultimately a policy consideration, but there are various policies in Title 20 that need to be reviewed, need to be updated, but it's also not consistent. I mean, one specifically is the fair and impartial policing policy. The language in S6 largely mirrors that language. And so that's another policy that does need to be periodically reviewed. There are other policies that don't have that language, but inevitably, and I'm sure that the Criminal Justice Council can speak better to this than I can about the type of review that they do of those policies. And the reason why I bring this up is that this is something that there was testimony about, how this is an ongoing burden essentially. And I don't know if it's something that is divorced from this project, but it's a separate duty that the Criminal Justice Council has to undertake due to multiple statutes.
And I guess the question is the extent to which this accreditation, inherent in that accreditation and maintaining it, doesn't require that routine review of the extent to which our curriculum aligns with best practices that emerge, and are constantly changing as well. So sometimes we put things in place and then we discover that in fact, as we get to the same place, it would happen as a matter of course, as opposed to a statutory prescription.
If may I weigh in?
Yes, I'd love to have you.
Thank you. So just to, one more time, just the question around, will we be able to get the job done with this policy and the larger picture? The answer is still yes, we could.
Thank you.
We could, but to everyone's point, outside of S6 is how, more specifically, how I would be using a policy director with the council and with the academy is guidance for law enforcement. That is always, that work piles up. This is pointed out again in the audit when we when we make requirements around training, certification, attendance, what counts. When we talk about training, it's usually in general terms, but what people have to go to changes all the time and there needs to be clarity around it. Compliance requires policy. We have a rules committee that's updating all of our rules, which will result in a number of policies, both internally and for the council and for law enforcement, in whatever level of policy and directive that we end up with. That's outside of S6, but there's certainly, if we got to get the policy done, we can do that. But if we're envisioning all the work that policy directors can do, and I don't have tons of experience here. I came from a department that served approximately 1,100 employees, and there was a whole policy unit that was dreadfully behind all the time and trying to keep up because policies need to be updated. So I think, there would be no lack of work that would be related to all of this.
All right. Well, we can let the bill move forward and we can put this on our 24 budget discussion. Because I think some of, I'm feeling quite conflicted. On one hand, you can say you can do it. On the next hand, you're saying it's a heavy lift. We know that we have ambitious timelines here. We know that we have some positions already added in the base. And so maybe the best thing, so we can have further discussion, and Senator Sears will be here, is that we will allow the policy to move forward. And then we will, because this is talking about in fiscal year 24, and have a better understanding of what's necessary upon further discussion, and address it in our decision-making relative to the FY 2024 budget.
Understood.
Acceptable, Senator Sears.
Absolutely. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, all right. I mean, because we don't want to be, we understand your desire to do everything you want to do. But I think we're still a little uneasy as to how much is achievable and what your resource needs are. And so I don't want to close that discussion as of today, even though we remove that section. It's one that we would continue in the context of our FY 2024 budget deliberations. Any other questions of Heather, or what about Ben? The only thing we would have is very easily is that we would just simply strike section 7.
Strike section 7, okay.
And then we will add it to our list on the 2024 budget discussion. Was this intended to be an ongoing position, Senator Sears? In other words, in your mind, is this a base increase, or was this the position necessary to carry out the work of this particular?
Well, at the time that the committee added it, our consideration was it to be a base increase.
Okay.
But the more testimony we've heard here, the more I understand
All right.
how it might work. But I would say even after a 3-year period, we may still find we need the position if we don't fund it in the in this budget. I think you're going to find that this was an important position.
Okay, that's what we will. Well, that's not what we will do because I am unanimous in this. It's a committee decision, but I'm thinking that people have some uneasiness about what the resource demands really are and what's being asked of the council, and we want to be sensitive to that. And I can't, say yes or no, but I don't want to say no today and just say, oh well, you figure it out and make it part of your 3-year plan, and then people either get overloaded or say, well, how come you're not meeting the timeframes within S6? Does anyone want to make a motion to amend the bill by removing the appropriation section 7?
So
I'll second it.
Okay, so our clerk is about the clerk. Unless there's further discussion, I'll have the clerk call the roll. So we have a motion made by Senator Ruth to strike section 7, the appropriation, and then you'll give us an amendment to make section 8 now section 7, seconded by Senator Sears.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
This is on amendment, so do you need a vote or do you?
Well, we can, yes, we do need a vote on the amendment, then a vote on the bill as amended.
Approved.
Yes.
Lyons.
Yes.
Person.
Yes.
Sears.
Yes,
Yes, we're in the Senate, remember?
Star. Senator Star.
Thank goodness.
The rules keep changing.
Senator Starr.
Yes,
Pressman, yes, Kitchell.
Yes. All right, now a motion to move bill favorably as amended.
so
All right.
moved.
All right, Senator Sears and second by, who got their hand
Senator
up
Lyons.
first? Senator Lyons? Okay.
Gets the lion's share.
Lyons, sure. Yeah,
Started, yeah.
is it supposed to continue all night?
No,
Till tomorrow,
not much,
think not much.
especially for the north, right?
Yeah, for the North End.
Okay, clerk will call the roll.
Ruth.
Yes.
Lyons.
Yes.
Pershing.
Yes.
Sears.
Yes,
Star.
yes,
Pressman, yes. Kitchell.
Yes. Okay. And the reporter would be Senator Sears.
that's fine. I won't be able to take it up.
Oh,
Somebody can do that for me.
okay. Okay, thank you. Once we get the amendment, we'll take it up.
Look at that.
Won't take you very much.
No, I could, be ready.
In 5 minutes?
If you want it, yeah.
Well, we'll take it up today if you can give us.
Okay, I'll quickly do it and send it, but I actually have to leave due to the snow to pick up kids. I won't be here necessarily, but I can quickly get it to you.
Kid time.
Kids time.
We know that.
Oh, yeah.
We will. Senator Sears, we'll probably have you sign that statement. You're working remotely and you authorize him to sign it for you. Whatever that statement is.
Yes, whatever that statement is.
So
Okay,
you can take care of your other responsibilities.
thank you very much.
Secretary Bloomer told me I had to take it up and sign it, and then Martine had to.
But if you're not here, then you can sign a statement that you're not, and you approve it and
Oh, well, we'll do
and
it.
authorizing Bloomer to
Okay.
sign it for you.
Oh,
We can still.
There's a standard statement that
You
we.
see
We voted
Bloomer's
as
signature,
six.
and he does that, and it's like a scribbly mess, you could never tell before.
So we haven't had a break and we have two 15-minute breaks, but in between, I'm gonna suggest we break now and do, then finish up the day with S37.
I have Jen Carvey's gonna be here to start on S37 at 3, so if you guys wanna take 10 minutes.
That would be great. Okay, so we'll go offline.
Cameron is in?